What the heck's going on with this country? I tell you, we've got to do something about the great divide that's happening, and I have the answer. And I believe it's music. I believe music heals the world. I want you to check out this interview with Pete Mancini. He just came out with a new album called American Equator. He talks about the great divide. There's something for everybody in this album. It's got power pop. It's got country. It's got Americana. It's got great messages about healing and hope. Check out my interview with Pete Mancini. Hey, everybody. I am so excited about my guest today. I met him several years ago. And let me tell you, we're all about music discovery, but once in a while, you'll come across an artist, you go, holy crap, this guy is so prolific, so diverse, amazing. We're going to talk about his album called American Equator. I want to welcome, I'm a big fan of his, Pete Mancini to the Long Island Sound Podcast. Welcome, Pete. So great to have you.
Thanks, man. It's always great to be back. Happy to be on the pod again.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. By the way, let's get right to it. On March 7th, you're going to be at the Mercury Lounge in...
March 27th.
Excuse me, March 27th. Let me
Yeah,
start
the
again.
record comes out March 7th, and the show is March 27th.
March 27th. It's a Thursday evening at the Mercury Lounge. You're going to have Adam LaGreca and Tom Moran, I think, will be joining you.
Yes. It's going to be a great night of music.
Yeah, Tom's got another prolific songwriter here from Long Island. Had Tom on the podcast. Was really, really great. So let me just give you my quick impressions, if you will.
Sure.
About the album. It's got everything for everybody. It starts off with a rockin' song called Calamity People, which I believe you wrote with Travis McKeveny.
Correct. Yes.
McKeveny.
That's correct.
It's a rocking thing. Reminds me of Neil Young. Boom. You had me at the first song. Okay. And we'll get into each one of the songs. But what I loved about the album, and I said this at the top, it has something for everything. Ballads. It talks about the divide that we have in this country. But let's do this. Roll back the pages for me. I'm really intrigued. You have, this is produced by a guy, Matt Patton from Drive-By Truckers.
Correct.
Tell me about how a Long Island guy gets to go down to Mississippi, meets with Matt Patton, and puts this album together. Give me some history.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So my buddy Nick Loss-Eaton, who is a dear friend, and he's a great songwriter. He has a band called Leland Sundries that I toured with on bass for a number of years. He works PR on the side for a number of artists, and he, hey Nick, if you're watching, shout out to Nick.
Excellent.
He introduced me to Matt Patton over email because he was working PR for Bette Smith, who recorded down at Dialback. And when I was looking for people to record my third album with, I had a list, and I was like kind of investigating, and then, got to know Patton, and it just worked out great. We had a date set, we were all good to go, and then the pandemic hit. And we kept pushing it back. We pushed it back to the summer, and I flew down during the pandemic. And then that was how the third album came about. And then when it came time to do this record, American Equator, we wanted to, it's like, well, we have to do another one, the last one went so well. And we got so close to some, big opportunities with it that, it's like, let's do one more. And happy we did. So it's essentially the same crew. We have Henry Barbie engineering on American Equator, a couple of different players this time around, but Schaefer Lena's back singing harmonies again. So it's kind of, it has the feel of the last record, but it's some new sonic territory, I think. It's a little more gritty, and it's definitely more of a rocker than that last record was, which, had its rockin' moments, but this one is more of a rock and roll record, I think. So
cool. So Pete, one of the things that I've noticed, and I always kind of give you my gut feel of when I listen to your music, and I know a little bit, you've been on the podcast before, but I sense, and for those who don't know, Pete also works with the very famous Jimmy Webb, singer-songwriter extraordinaire, works very closely with him. But two things kind of grab me about this album, and I'm curious about the influence of you working with Jimmy Webb to a degree, not on the album, but just working with him in general, and your good late friend, Travis McKeveny. which you do 2 songs, and the songs were Calamity People and Sun Came Up, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
All right, I did my homework, and I want to talk about Sun Came Up because it blew me away as far as hope. I'll leave it at that. So
It means a lot.
so being in the company of great people,
Mhm.
tell me about the influence of Travis and any influence that Jimmy has on your songwriting and your journey in music.
Well, Travis, dear friend, like a brother to me. We wrote a lot of great songs together. And Jimmy, he's become a great friend, and, I can't believe it. It's just been amazing. And what's interesting is, like, cosmically, they share a birthday. So it's like the two greatest songwriters I've ever known share a birthday. And, like when I met Jimmy, he was mourning Glenn Campbell still, and, I was mourning Travis. I met Jimmy a month after we lost Travis. And,
wow.
yeah, that was something that we initially bonded on, because Jimmy and Glenn, they were like brothers. And, yeah, I guess Travis's influence on my writing. Travis was he was all in. He was an artist first and foremost. He was such a great songwriter, and everything went into his art. And I learned so much from writing with him, and his attention to detail was, it was just, yeah, he would consult a map if it was like a song in a certain place. He would one time when we wrote back in Bakersfield together, he wrote me like a whole, like a thesis, based on like the changes that he wanted to make, so yeah, that was Travis's style. And Jimmy literally wrote the book on songwriting. There's a book called Tunesmith, and it's just like a college course in songwriting. And I've learned so much just from hanging out with him and talking to him, driving around, getting the stories, but also just the nuts and bolts of songwriting. Like, we talk about songwriting a lot, and his methods, and so they both had a huge influence on me, just from knowing them and just from talking to them. As far as the record goes, we have 2 co-writes with Travis, and then the Paris Hotel. That was a song that came about when I was on tour with Jimmy. Quick little story. We're driving past the Paris Hotel on 495, and Jimmy, essentially he goes, "Oh, someone should write a song about that place." So I started writing it, and I got 2 verses down. I always hoped that we would co-write it, but Jimmy's a lone wolf. He doesn't do co-writes. That's his thing.
Right.
Yeah, untouchable. So, I showed him the verses I had at a sound check, and he's like, "Huh." And I'm like, "Oh God, here we go." He goes, "Needs a 3rd verse," and then he walks away. I was like, "Okay." He didn't say it was bad.
Okay.
So I ended up cutting it, and I'm happy I did, because it came out really cool.
It's amazing. You're in this one. You're a very well accomplished guy. My first impressions when I met you back in Stony Brook, I'm like, wow, this guy is so introverted, but he's such a great singer. And I probably changed my perspective on you over the years, but you're in this quasi apprenticeship program. And I just want to touch on one of the things that I noticed about locations, the Paris Hotel, Spy Rock Road and stuff like that. And for those who are into songwriting, I remember talking to Caroline Doctorow, who's a famous a folk singer out east on Long Island.
I know Caroline. Yeah, Caroline's great.
Great gal. And, she talked about writing about places. And I thought that was kind of interesting to key in. And that's one of the things that I noticed on your album as well. Hey, let's get into this. I'm guilty of being pissed off a lot about politics, the direction of the country.
Yeah.
And I try to put guardrails up in my conversations, and I'm always wondering why, how people can think a certain way, what drives them. I'm curious about it, and I'm freaking frustrated. But what I love about your music and the things you kind of talk about, when you put things lyrically, it's like you can take a breath and see how things are. So tell me about Calamity People and then American Equator, as far as how these things came about for you, how these muses got developed?
Well, Calamity People, that song is, it's kind of about our media culture, our outrage culture. And, you know, it kind of opens up in that last verse where it's, watching the pundits, calamity world, where it's like, the phrase came about when a friend of mine, described someone else that we mutually know as a calamity person, where everything is just this big calamity and there's always something going on and it's
Right.
always someone else's fault and you're pointing the finger. And the song kind of came about as like that grievance culture and that, just this outrage culture that we find ourselves living in. So that was the inspiration going in for the song. And that end part to the song, I had a totally different song with a riff in it, a riff-based song that I ended up scrapping, but I liked the riff. So that song ends in a completely different place than where it started, and I was just happy with that arrangement. And American Equator is sort of about the same thing. It's more about the Great Divide, where I was on tour, and I was in Virginia, and a friend of mine came to the show, and she goes, "Welcome to the Equator." But I think she meant the Mason-Dixon line. And I was like, "Oh, welcome to the American Equator." And everyone was like, "Whoa." So I remembered the phrase, and later on that same tour, I was down in Oxford, Mississippi, staying with friends, and I was playing this guitar that had an amp built into it, and the song just kind of came out right there, and mostly formed as is. And so I want to reiterate, though, that it's not about North versus South, because that's not the song. The song is about the ideological divide in the country, where the American Equator, if it was a physical place that you could visit, it would just be like a war zone, like because we have all these hateful comments online. We have, people from behind a keyboard or a phone, they'll say horrible stuff. But one thing I've learned from touring around with Jimmy is that, people are so nice. We have more in common than we have apart, but I think like our media landscape and the social media and being online, it divides us into different teams, different camps, and we're made to hate each other. And like really the people that deserve our hatred are the broligarchs and the fascists who are making our lives demonstrably worse with their hateful rhetoric and their hateful politics. And, if the common people realized, oh, we have more in common, they would be, they'd be shitting their pants, because it's like, common people are, we have more in common than these like rich people who are trying to loot the country right now.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because I've been on a corporate tear in that is thinking what you just said. When you look at the pundits or what's going to drive ratings, it's division. It's almost like a WWE fight where you have the announcer in the middle who's got to have these two warring parties that get fit. They got to do that build up, and that's going to be the shiny piece of tackle to draw them to their platform. And you got to get to a place, I'm preaching to myself here, where you say enough. Yeah, enough is enough. And that's what I love.
Exactly.
That's what I love about music, because it can be that common denominator that we take a breath, we listen, and we see what we have in common. And if we start with that foundation, there is that ray of hope, that is a light, I think, in each one of us. And I was so by the way, when I speak to artists, I kind of, I'm like an old school guy with an album. I still have a CD player in my car, thank God.
Me too.
And here it is. Here it is. American Equator, everybody. Okay. Yeah. I got an advanced copy because I'm a big shot and I'm cheap. But I digest your stuff, Pete. Okay. And I listen to it over and over. That's what we did in the old school. We got a physical album, which I think you can get a physical album of this, right? Vinyl?
Yeah, we have vinyl. We have CDs. We got merch bundles up on the Bandcamp, and pre-orders are still open. So
on the Bandcamp, and with that, I'm going to try something here real quick. I'm going to show everybody Pete's Bandcamp.
Wow, there it is.
There it is. So you're
Yeah.
going to go to petemancini.bandcamp.com
Mm-hmm.
and you could pre-order the digital album, whole bunch of stuff, the compact, $10. It should be a $25 CD, Pete. I'm just saying.
Well, you know,
And
I keep my prices low so everyone can enjoy the music. But yeah, we got some. If you go to the merch section, we have some CD and shirt bundles, and all purchases include unlimited streaming in the Bandcamp app. So if you buy the vinyl, you can listen to it at home, but then you have it on your phone in the car. So, you know, it's kind of a great best of both worlds scenario.
yeah, excellent, excellent. So I digest your stuff and kind of like the muse. And by the way, what I love about singer-songwriters, in my opinion, they're wired. Like you get a catchphrase, American Equator or whatever, it rumbles around a little bit. Sometimes you're fortunate enough where you can bang it out, you know, but you act on it, which you know, I think is really cool. But I want to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to give you my impression. The sun came up. My impression was there's a line in it, sun comes up not right away. I'm paraphrasing. And I'm thinking about sobriety. I'm thinking about hope. And the fact that you wrote it with Travis and me knowing Travis's story and his passing, it just, right now is raising the hair on my arms. And I want to tell the audience, you got to get this album. You got to see Pete live because you'll be blown away. You're such a talent and you're such a storyteller, not only in your music, but your stage presence. And that's why people have to go see you live. Anyway,
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Tell me about Sun Came Up.
Sure. So me and Travis, we co-wrote that song. Travis wrote the lyrics. He wrote like just a short poem, and I wrote the music to that chorus. And we sat on his back deck, and I have a recording of us doing it, which is great.
Nice.
And yeah, that was intended originally to be just a little snippet, kind of like, you know, Her Majesty at the end of Abbey Road, I guess. You know, just a little snippet for the end of his album From Dublin to Duluth, which we could also talk about, which is
yeah,
done.
Please.
We finished
great.
it.
Nice.
But anyway, so that was going to be a snippet at the end of his album, and then Trav ultimately ended up scrapping that idea. So when he left us, I still had this chorus, and then all the things that I saw and like heard in those times, I felt like I was being guided by Travis to finish that song. And
Wow.
It was a kind of a cosmically heavy experience where I was finishing this song, but it felt like I was still writing with Travis.
Amazing.
And I wrote the verses around it, and yeah, that was what we ended up with. So that in a way was like our final co-write, and I was happy to get that over the finish line because it was just, you know, Trav struggled with you know, depression and things like that. You know, we all have our struggles, and you know, Trav was no stranger to it. And but that's such a beautiful, hopeful thing, like you said. The sun came up; it always does. Dark as my soul's night was, and it's just kind of a beautiful message. And yeah, I was happy to finish that with him.
You know what? A couple of things. What I'm hearing from you, and I truly believe this, that you know, there is life beyond someone's passing.
I believe
Whether
it too.
it's energy, spirit, call it whatever you will. And when you can tune into that, what a blessing that is. But also when you think about, I think about this. You know, the great comics, great writers, always carried a weight of something, some heaviness. And I think it's going to may sound strange to some people. I think there's a blessing in that when you go through a real difficult thing, then you can articulate it to me in a song or conversation. Empathy just kind of grows, and I make that connection with you.
Yeah.
And that's what music's about. That's why, by the way, I never ask an artist, what does that song mean? You know, because guess what? I'm not going to steal it from some other person listening to that song. It may mean something completely different, but it's nice to get your perspective of how it grew and how it got created. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, like just one more note about Travis. He was a very empathetic writer. And if you look at some of his songs like Slow Climber, and you look at, some of the stuff off of his upcoming record, From Dublin to Duluth, he just wrote from a place of caring and kindness, and that was like his personality. So,
Well,
he's kind of like John Prine in that way, Um, just, fantastic songs. His next record, we just finished it. And
yeah. So tell me about that, because Travis had some unfinished stuff. I saw you raised some funds to get it produced.
mhm.
Give me some background on that.
Yeah, so Trav's third album, we were ready to go into the studio and record it, and we lost him sadly before we got the chance to. And we kept the band alive. So everyone, we had this kind of steely determination to keep the famous Dr. Scanlon band alive and keep
Right.
his music alive, his legacy. And it's a very important thing to all of us. So we went in, we finished his album. Um, I think it's 11 new songs, and it's coming out great. Like you said, we raised some money to do it. The community all pitched in, which we were very grateful for. And we finally finished tracking. And it's been a long process, but because it's been kind of difficult. It's
Oh,
emotionally
I can only
heavy
imagine.
process. And we got it over the finish line. So now we just have to mix it, master it, and then we'll get it out to the people. So
Hey, I would love that to put pressure on you guys. I'd love to have the band come on the podcast to talk about it,
that'd be
because
great. We'd be happy to.
I think that's such a beautiful story. By the way, I was talking to you the other day, just 2 days ago, to Mike Nugent, who we both know, and Mike had so many wonderful things to say to you, and he's like, "This guy is so prolific. I want to be like him."
Oh, well,
And
I love Mike. Mike's the best.
yeah, Mike's a great guy. I could talk on and on about Mike, but I want to talk about a couple of things that people may not know about you, Pete. And one of the shows I went to, and just kudos out to Bill Herman from Paradiddle Records, and you put an album together. I got it here, called Silent Troubadour.
Yes.
And Silent Troubadour is a tribute to Gene Clark of the Byrds, a very prolific, tragic figure. Um, but so I saw you and kudos to Rich Lanahan as well. Saw you at my father's place, and I was blown away about it, about what you did. But what Pete did is he wrote a song called Silent Troubadour. Tell me about the writing of that song, because I think it plays in well. And as my audience gets to know Pete Mancini, well, go back on his discography and look up Silent Troubadour. It's just fantastic. Tell me about that song.
So, Silent Troubadour, we were doing this Birds project. We didn't even have a Gene Clark focus yet. We just had a few
Okay.
songs recorded, and they kind of sat for years. So this album was years in the making. Bill Herman had us over. We did a couple tracks. Didn't really know what to do with them. And then I read Mr. Tambourine Man by John Ryerson. I don't know if I'm getting that pronunciation right, but it was such a fantastic book about Gene Clark. It's like the definitive tome about Gene, so detailed. And, it's a heartbreaking, tragic story, like you said. And I said to the guys, I'm like, hey, what if we did a Gene Clark album? And then it was like, okay, boom, we're on. And then we started
Okay.
doing more tracks. It started coming together. Rich brought some in, I brought some in. And then Rich brought in the Mastersons, who are just a fantastic Americana duo. They play with Steve Earle and, Chris
Okay.
Masterson, Eleanor Masterson. They really elevated the proceedings a lot with their contributions. And, then we had this album, some great Gene tunes. And I was sitting at the guitar, and I was inspired by, they described Gene's writing process in the book, and how he
Okay.
would just channel songs from some kind of unknown place.
All right.
And I was trying to emulate that in a way, but I remember, after absorbing that book, that song just kind of came out, and I sent it to Bill, and Bill is, I love Bill. He's a brother to me, but he doesn't really get excited about a lot of things,
Yeah,
and I sent him,
he's a laid back guy.
he's a laid back guy. I sent him that song, and he goes, holy shit. And I was like, ooh, okay. Like if that's like the reaction I get from Bill, it must be good. So we recorded it, and that was kind of our mission statement, inspired by Steve Earle a little bit, because, he did an album of his son's songs. He did Guy
Okay.
Clark. He did Towns Van Zandt. And yeah.
Yeah.
So this album was kind of like that.
So what's interesting as I'm looking at your musical, I hate the word journey, but your musical life and what you've done and these different collaborations. I see so many solo artists out there that are what I would call solo practitioner, and there's certain weight to that. But I think when you put yourself out there and you're willing to work with other people and take their influences, and it's just it seems kind of magical to me. I can only imagine what it's like. How did you how did the drive-by trucker guys, there's two guys on the album, right?
Mhm.
That are the drive-by trucker guys. Matt Patton, bass guitar, and Jay Gonzalez on keyboards and guitars. So
Yes.
you kind of touched on this. You had met him touring around, and how do you make these connections, Pete?
Well, Patton owns Dialback Sound. So
Okay.
that's his studio, and he's the producer. He also plays bass. So we brought in Jay from DBT, and Jay is like a power pop, kind of like a genius of making parts for songs. He is,
Okay.
yeah, just, I mean, I'm such a huge fan of his music, and but as a part maker, he's like unparalleled in my opinion. So shout out to Jay. He's just, and he's a great guy. And we cut these tracks. We had Joe Leone from the Hillside Airmen on drums, Patton on bass, and we cut a bunch of the basic tracks, and then we would just kind of pass the ball to Jay. So like last time around, he played on a few tracks, but this time it was just like, send it to Jay. He'll do his thing. And we had a few other players. We had John Smith from the Dexatines. We had Kel Kellum on pedal steel. We had Tim Lee on Technicolor Days doing the power pop thing. And it was just a great crew this time around. But yeah, Jay really elevated the album with his parts, and just like he does in the Truckers. And Drive-By Truckers are one of my favorite bands. They're like, one of the great American rock bands. I mean, if you look at their discography, it's unparalleled how many great albums they have, how many great songs. If you want to talk prolific, you look at Patterson Hood, who just keeps cranking out great songs and great albums. And to work with some of those guys is just, it's an honor and a privilege. So,
Well, you know what? That points to your humility, because I can only imagine as a songwriter, it's your baby. It's your vision of a creation. It's an infant when you lay down some tracks and stuff, and now you're taking that as a metaphor. You're taking that child and handing it over and say, "Hey, raise this child up, and do whatever influence, because I trust you." There's got to be a big level of trust. Obviously, see history. Yeah, they raised 5 other great kids, so they're going to do well with mine. But I think that's just a fantastic dynamic to have, that you have access to.
Well, what was great about working with Matt Patton is that he's a real producer, in the sense that, he has a vision that he kind of guides you towards. So like you said, you hand it over to the producer, and you end up in a place that you never would have expected. And that's like the real magic of recording, I think, or the recording process rather. So Patton on the last record, like previous albums, I would be very nitpicky and like try to control everything. But then the last record, Patton was like, all right, we're going to do this. I was like, okay, cool. Hands off, And I realized that that's such a great approach, because I do have too much of an emotional attachment to the songs, because they've been sitting in my head for so long, and I have a certain thought of how it should go.
Right,
But Patton has a completely different plan. So, that's one of the great things about that collaboration, was that, I could like take a step back, and then, I trust him as a producer. So that's why we ended up with such great results, is because, it's true collaboration in that sense.
Now, Pete, take me to the position of how things get released. Kind of educate this old man here for a bit. you took American Equator, which I think is one great name for the album, great song, and you released that a little while ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put that out. March 7th, the full album comes out.
Mm-hmm.
March 27th, you're doing that launch at Mercury Records. By the way, everybody, and I always fail to do
Mercury
this.
Lounge.
Mercury Lounge, thank you. That's right. Brain
Oh,
fart.
good.
Is I want who's ever listening to this, I want you to comment in the comments section on YouTube about this, and I want you to particularly go listen to the music, and then comment and tell me how you feel about it. And by the way, we're going to have all the information of the different things that we're talking about in the description, so you can take it further. But Pete, what are your plans? After the 27th, like I've known you really to be a soloist going out there. What are your plans in exposing people more to the album?
Well, I plan on hitting the road. I'm going to be doing some tour dates. I have like some sporadic tour dates booked right now, and I'm definitely hoping to add more. We're going to be announcing more. I'm going to be hitting the road with Jimmy Webb again in May. We have one date in Boston announced right now with more to come, and then we have some dates that we're going to announce for the fall, and that's going to be a bigger tour. And yeah, just, I'm going to keep playing shows. I'm going to keep going out there and doing what I do, and, I think it's more about you go out there and you convert people. You show them the tunes, you convert a new fan, just one at a time, like I've always done for years. And yeah,
right.
I'm gonna
Now,
keep doing that.
Will you go out solo? Will you pull some pieces of a band together, or what's your thought process on that?
Well,
if you
some are
want to
solo, some are with the Hillside Airmen.
Okay.
Usually when I tour with the Airmen, it's usually a 3-piece, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So it depends on the gig. So at the Mercury Lounge show, I'll have a full band with the Hillside Airmen, and everything's at PeteMancini.com/shows. You could see the tour dates, and you could buy tickets. And yeah, just gonna keep onward and upward. That's
nice. Tell me,
that's the plan.
I haven't been to the Mercury Lounge. Have you played there before? You want to tell me? Okay, tell me about it.
It's kind of a New York City institution.
Okay.
Good sized room with a great stage, great sound system. And I used to play there a lot with my band, Butcher's Blind. And those are some really great, fun shows. And I haven't been back there for a long time. So I'm really excited to go back because, that is like, when I think New York City live music, I think Mercury Lounge. So I'm very happy, very excited to be playing there with the buddies, Adam LaGreca, Tom Moran, 2 great songwriters. And it should just be a great night of music. So I'm excited. We're going to play a bunch from the new record. We're going to play some from Killing the Old Ways. And got a kind of a newish lineup for this show. And I think it's going to be a great night of music. So I hope everyone listening can make it out. Hope you can make it too, man.
Well, since my daughter now is in the big city, I'm going to drive her and her friends there. Send out the waves.
Gather the troops.
So we can gather the troops and convert some more disciples over to Pete Mancini. I tell you from a guy who appreciates music and music discovery. Pete, I'm so happy I met you. I gotta thank you so much for the time that you've co-hosted here.
Means a lot.
Yeah, you co-hosted with me. I look forward to having you back. And man, kudos out to you. I don't need to wish you success. You have success, and it's going to continue. And I appreciate you coming on the pod.
Well, thank you, man. Always happy to be here. And thank you for all the support and great chats over the years. So,
all right, everybody. Until next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well, everybody.